The sun was beginning to set over the busy streets of New York City. Nathan, a tall black man in his mid-30s dressed in an expensive tailored suit, stood at the curb of Fifth Avenue. His phone buzzed with constant messages, but he ignored them. His mind was set on getting a taxi to make it to an important meeting across town. He raised his hand, hoping one of the iconic yellow cabs would pull over. After a few moments, a taxi slowed down, and Nathan took a step forward, but the driver glanced at him and sped off. Nathan stood frozen, blinking in disbelief. He had money, looked professional, and yet he knew what this was. He sighed, shaking his head. Another cab appeared, and this time Nathan moved quickly, but the driver didn't even make eye contact, swerving into the next lane to avoid stopping near him. It was clear what was happening. No one wanted to give him a ride because of his skin color. He clenched his fists, a familiar anger rising inside him. He had experienced this kind of discrimination before, but it never stopped hurting. Several taxis passed him, some barely slowing down before zooming off the moment they saw him. It wasn't just frustrating, it was humiliating. Nathan wasn't just anyone. He was successful, well-educated, and on the verge of sealing a multi-million-dollar deal. None of that mattered on the streets. Here, he was just another black man trying to get by. More people gathered on the curb waiting for taxis. A middle-aged white couple stood near Nathan, whispering and looking at him. Nathan ignored them. He had other things to think about. Another taxi came. Nathan stepped forward, but the driver hesitated. Nathan could see the man's eyes in the rearview mirror, judging him. The driver shook his head and gestured as if Nathan wasn't worth explaining to. The white couple waved, and the driver who had just rejected Nathan pulled over to them. The couple smiled at Nathan as they got in the car. The driver nodded at them as if he'd done them a favor by choosing them over Nathan. Nathan's anger boiled over. He wasn't going to let this pass without saying something. He approached the taxi and knocked on the window. "Excuse me," Nathan said, his voice steady but laced with frustration. The driver rolled down the window just an inch, enough to speak but not enough to invite conversation. "What do you want?" the driver muttered, his tone impatient. "I've been standing here for 15 minutes and you ignored me just to pick them up. Why?" The driver narrowed his eyes, looking Nathan up and down. "I don't have to explain myself to you," he spat, before rolling up the window again. The couple inside exchanged uneasy glances, but neither said a word. Nathan stepped back, letting out a long breath. It wasn't worth it. He wasn't going to stoop to their level. But as the taxi drove off, he couldn't shake the bitter taste the encounter had left behind. Nathan's phone buzzed again, but this time he answered. "Where are you?" a voice demanded on the other end. "I'm trying to get a taxi," Nathan replied, his voice tight. "I'll be there as soon as I can." "You better hurry. They're waiting for you. We can't afford to lose this deal." "I know," Nathan said, rubbing his forehead. He hung up and stuffed the phone back into his pocket, glancing around. At this point, he wasn't sure if he'd make it to the meeting on time. As Nathan contemplated walking, another taxi pulled up, but this one didn't stop for him either. He was about to give up when something caught his eye, a sleek black luxury car approaching from the distance. It wasn't a taxi, but it slowed down near Nathan. The tinted window rolled down, revealing a familiar face. "Nathan!" a deep voice called out. It was Derek, his business partner. Relief washed over Nathan as he walked toward the car. Derek, a white man with graying hair and a sharp sense of style, waved him over. "Hop in," Derek said with a grin. Nathan climbed into the passenger seat, feeling the tension in his body start to ease. But as they drove off, Derek's eyes caught the frustrated expression on Nathan's face. "What's wrong?" Derek asked, glancing at Nathan. Nathan shook his head. "Just the usual. Can't even get a taxi in this city without dealing with this crap." Derek's smile faded. "I'm sorry you have to go through that, man." "It's whatever," Nathan said, though the anger in his chest hadn't quite settled. "Let's just get to the meeting." They arrived at the glass skyscraper where the meeting was being held. As they stepped out of the car, Derek turned to Nathan with a mischievous grin. "Oh, by the way," he said, I arranged something special for you. Nathan raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about? You'll see, Derek replied cryptically. As they walked into the building, Nathan was greeted by a group of executives and shareholders waiting in the lobby. They all turned to him with wide smiles, eager to shake his hand. Nathan was used to the attention, but something felt different today. As they rode the elevator up to the conference room, Derek nudged Nathan. You remember the taxi situation earlier? Derek asked. Yeah, what about it? Well, I had a little chat with one of the drivers. Nathan frowned, not understanding. What do you mean? Derek chuckled. Let's just say that driver and a few others are in for a surprise. When they reached the top floor, Nathan followed Derek into the boardroom where the final negotiations were about to take place. The doors swung open, and there, sitting at the head of the table, was none other than the CEO of the taxi company that had refused Nathan earlier. Nathan stopped in his tracks, his heart pounding. The CEO looked up and froze as soon as his eyes met Nathan's. The color drained from his face. Mr. Hale, Derek said, his voice dripping with irony. I'd like to introduce you to our newest partner, Nathan Turner. The room fell into a stunned silence. Mr. Hale stammered, struggling to find his words. He had been the one behind the company's discriminatory policies. The same man who had refused to offer services to Nathan had just learned that Nathan was now one of the company's biggest shareholders. Nathan stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. It's funny how things come full circle, isn't it? Mr. Hale's face turned pale as he realized the gravity of his actions. Nathan stood tall, feeling the moment's weight. He let the tension build for a few seconds, watching Mr. Hale squirm. The other executives looked nervous, unsure of how to react. Mr. Hale finally spoke, his voice shaky. Mr. Turner, I didn't know. I didn't know. What didn't you know? Nathan interrupted, his voice sharper than before. That you were enforcing racist policies? Or that the man you refused to serve today would become your business partner? The room was quiet. Everyone was still. Mr. Hale tried to speak but couldn't. His hands shook as he shuffled the papers, hoping they would save him from humiliation. Derek whispered to Nathan, You have the power now. It's up to you. Nathan looked at Mr. Hale again. The room was watching him, waiting for his next move. He could get back at the man who had looked down on him and change the policies that kept people like him from receiving the same treatment as others. Nathan looked around the room. The nervous executives and shareholders had built their wealth on a discriminatory foundation. It wasn't just about Mr. Hale. It was about all of them and the system they had kept in place too long. He straightened his suit and looked at Mr. Hale with confidence. What's funny about power? Nathan said. My voice is steady. It shows who we really are. Today you showed me who you are. I'm not like you. I won't do what you do. He paused, letting his words sink in. Mr. Hale looked relieved but afraid, unsure of what Nathan would say next. I won't tolerate this in a company I'm part of, Nathan said. Things are changing. Immediately. He turned to the room and spoke to the whole board. This company will move forward on new terms. We're implementing anti-discrimination policies. Anyone who doesn't adhere to them will be out. We'll create opportunities for marginalized people and respect them. People agreed, but Nathan could tell they were uncomfortable. He didn't care. He wasn't there to make them comfortable. You can step down or I'll make sure you're forced out, Nathan said, turning back to the CEO. Mr. Hale's face reddened. He opened his mouth but closed it again. He had no leverage. I'll step down, Mr. Hale whispered. Nathan nodded. Good. This is a lesson for everyone here. Times are changing. Nathan turned and left the room, leaving everyone stunned. Derek followed, grinning. As they reached the elevator, Derek clapped Nathan on the back. That was something. Nathan let out a breath, feeling better. Yeah, he said, smiling. It was. The elevator doors opened, and Nathan looked back at the tall glass building. It had been a long day. It was a fight for dignity, respect, and change. Nathan felt like the world was moving in the right direction. As the elevator went down, Nathan thought about the taxi drivers, the people on the streets, and the millions who still face the same struggles. He hadn't changed the world, but he had started. That was enough for now. Nathan stepped out of the building into the cool evening air. The sky was purple and orange. He flagged down a taxi, and this time, a yellow cab pulled over. He smiled as he got into the back seat, feeling like things were finally moving forward. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Home," Nathan said. The driver nodded, and they drove off. Nathan leaned back and watched the city lights blur past. The world still had a long way to go, but tonight, he had made it a little bit better. That was all that mattered.